Maria Santos never planned to become a hero. Growing up in a small border town in Texas, she was the quiet girl who always carried a first aid kit in her backpack and helped injured animals she found on her way to school. Her friends teased her about it, but Maria couldn't stand seeing anything in pain. After high school, she joined the Army as a combat medic. The training was brutal, but Maria excelled. She learned to treat gunshot wounds, perform emergency surgery in field conditions, and stay calm under pressure. Her instructors noticed something special about her. While other medics panicked during simulations, Maria became more focused and precise when things got chaotic. During her first deployment to Afghanistan, Maria's unit was stationed at a remote outpost near the Pakistani border. The soldiers quickly nicknamed her Doc, standard for any medic, but Maria earned extra respect. She treated everything from minor cuts to serious injuries from IED explosions. More importantly, she listened to the soldiers' fears and worries during long, quiet nights. The outpost was considered relatively safe, but everyone knew that could change in minutes. Intelligence reports suggested enemy activity in the surrounding mountains, but nothing concrete. Maria spent her days treating routine medical issues: dehydration, minor infections, homesickness that manifested as stomach problems. She wrote letters home to her mother, describing the beautiful sunsets over the Afghan mountains while carefully avoiding any mention of the dangers. One evening, while organizing medical supplies in her tent, Maria heard Sergeant Johnson talking to another soldier about increased radio chatter in the area. Enemy forces were reportedly planning something, but nobody knew what or when. That night, Maria double-checked her medical kit and made sure all her equipment was ready. Something in the air felt different, and her instincts had never failed her before. She had no idea that within 48 hours those same instincts would save dozens of lives and earn her a place in military history. The attack came at dawn on a Tuesday morning. Maria was checking on Private Rodriguez, who had twisted his ankle during patrol the previous day, when the first mortar shell exploded near the communications tent. The blast shook the entire outpost, sending dust and debris flying everywhere. Within seconds, the quiet morning erupted into chaos. Enemy fighters had positioned themselves in the hills surrounding the base, launching a coordinated assault from 3 different directions. Automatic weapons fire echoed across the compound as soldiers scrambled for cover and returned fire. Maria's training kicked in immediately. While bullets whizzed overhead, she grabbed her medical bag and began moving toward the wounded. The first casualty was Corporal Stevens, who had taken shrapnel in his leg from the initial mortar blast. Maria dragged him behind a concrete barrier and quickly applied a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. More explosions rocked the base as enemy mortars found their range. Maria could hear Sergeant Johnson shouting orders over the radio, calling for air support and reinforcements. But help was at least 30 minutes away, and the enemy seemed to know exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage. As Maria worked on Stevens, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Through the smoke and confusion, she spotted movement near the main ammunition depot, a figure in civilian clothes carrying what looked like an explosive device. The person was moving with purpose, staying low and using the chaos as cover. Maria realized immediately what was happening. This wasn't just a random attack. It was a carefully planned operation designed to destroy the outpost's ammunition supply. If that depot exploded, it would kill everyone within a 100-meter radius and cripple their ability to defend themselves. She looked around frantically. The nearest soldiers were pinned down by sniper fire, focused on defending their positions. Nobody else had seen the infiltrator approaching the ammunition depot. Maria faced an impossible choice: continue treating Stevens, who needed immediate medical attention, or leave him to stop a threat that could kill them all. The infiltrator was now less than 50 meters from the depot, moving steadily closer while the defenders were distracted by the frontal assault. Maria made her decision. Maria pressed her field dressing firmly against Stevens' wound and told him to keep pressure on it. "Don't move until I get back," she whispered urgently. Stevens nodded weakly, understanding the gravity in her voice even through his pain. Moving. In a low crouch, Maria began making her way toward the ammunition depot. Every instinct told her this was insane. She was a medic, not a combat soldier. Her job was to save lives, not engage the enemy. But she also knew that if the depot exploded, there would be no lives left to save. The infiltrator was now 30 meters from the target, still undetected by the other defenders. Maria could see it was a young man, probably in his 20s, wearing a suicide vest packed with explosives. He moved with the confidence of someone who believed his mission was already accomplished. Maria's heart pounded as she realized she had no weapon except the small pistol all medics carried for self-defense. She had qualified with it during training but had never fired it in combat. More importantly, she was too far away for an accurate shot, and missing would alert the bomber to her presence. Instead, Maria did something unexpected. She began moving, parallel to the bomber's path, using storage containers and equipment to stay hidden. Her plan was risky but simple: get close enough to tackle him before he could reach the depot or detonate his vest. As she moved, Maria thought about her family back home, about the soldiers counting on her, and about all the medical training that had taught her to preserve life above all else. Now she was preparing to take one to save many others. The bomber reached the outer fence of the ammunition storage area and began cutting through the wire with small bolt cutters. Maria was now 20 meters away, hidden behind a generator. She could hear him muttering prayers under his breath as he worked. This was her moment. Maria took a deep breath, said a quick prayer of her own, and sprinted toward the bomber. Her movement was silent but swift, years of medical training having taught her to move quickly and efficiently in crisis situations. The bomber heard her footsteps at the last second and turned, his hand moving toward the detonation trigger on his vest. Time seemed to slow down as Maria launched herself at the bomber. She could see the surprise in his eyes, the way his hand fumbled for the detonation switch, the determination mixed with fear on his young face. Maria's tackle was perfectly timed, hitting him just as his fingers found the trigger. They crashed to the ground together, rolling in the dust near the ammunition depot's fence. The bomber was stronger than Maria, but she had the advantage of surprise and desperation. As they struggled, she managed to grab his wrist and prevent him from pressing the detonation button. The bomber shouted something in Pashto, trying to alert his comrades, but the sounds of battle around the outpost drowned out his voice. Maria used a move she had learned in hand-to-hand combat training, using the bomber's own momentum to flip him over and pin his arm behind his back. But the bomber wasn't finished. He twisted violently, trying to break free and reach the trigger with his other hand. Maria realized she couldn't hold him much longer. He was bigger and stronger, and her grip was slipping from the sweat and dust. In that critical moment, Maria made another split-second decision. She drew her sidearm and pressed it against the bomber's head. "Stop," she said firmly in the few words of Pashto she had learned. "Don't move." The bomber froze, understanding the universal language of a gun barrel against his skull. Maria's hands were shaking, but her voice remained steady. She had never pointed a weapon at another human being before, and the weight of the moment crashed down on her. With her free hand, Maria carefully reached around and disconnected the detonation device from the explosive vest. The bomber's eyes filled with tears of frustration and defeat as he realized his mission had failed. Maria felt sick to her stomach, but she knew she had just saved dozens of lives. The sounds of battle around the outpost were beginning to fade as air support arrived and the enemy fighters retreated. Maria could hear helicopters in the distance and the distinctive sound of jets overhead. Help had arrived, but the immediate crisis was over. Still holding the bomber at gunpoint, Maria used her radio to call for assistance. "This is Doc," she said, her voice barely steady. "I need backup at the ammunition depot. I've got a situation here." Within minutes, Sergeant Johnson and 2 other soldiers arrived at Maria's location. They found her still holding the bomber at gunpoint, the disconnected explosive device lying safely in the dust beside them. Johnson's eyes widened as he took in the scene. Their medic had single-handedly prevented what could have been a catastrophic explosion. "Jesus, Doc," Johnson breathed as his team secured the bomber. "How did you even see this guy?" Maria's hands were still shaking as she holstered her weapon. "I was treating Stevens when I noticed movement near the depot. Nobody else was in position to stop him." She looked at the young bomber, who was now zip-tied and sitting against the fence. He was maybe 30 seconds away from reaching the main storage building. The explosive ordnance disposal team arrived shortly after, carefully examining the bomber's vest and the device Maria had disconnected. Staff Sergeant Williams, the EOD team leader, whistled low as he studied the setup. "This would have taken out half the base," he told Johnson. "Your medic just saved a lot of lives." As the immediate danger passed, Maria remembered Stevens and the other wounded soldiers. She quickly returned to her medical duties. treating injuries from the attack while trying to process what had just happened. Her hands were steady again as she worked, the familiar routine of medical care helping to calm her nerves. The attack had lasted less than an hour, but it felt like days. 7 soldiers had been wounded, but thanks to Maria's quick medical response and the prevented explosion, there were no fatalities. The enemy had retreated after air support arrived, leaving behind equipment and the captured bomber, who would provide valuable intelligence. That evening, as Maria cleaned and restocked her medical supplies, soldiers kept stopping by to thank her. Word had spread quickly about what she had done. "You saved all our asses, Doc," Private Rodriguez said, speaking for many of the others. "We owe you big time," but Maria felt conflicted about the praise. She had joined the military to save lives, not to capture enemies or prevent attacks. The moment when she had held that gun to another person's head kept replaying in her mind. She wondered if she had changed somehow, if this experience had made her into someone different. Colonel Martinez, the base commander, called Maria to his office the next morning. She expected a debriefing about the incident, but instead found several high-ranking officers waiting to meet her. Colonel Martinez stood up as Maria entered his office, followed by a general she didn't recognize and several other officers. "Specialist Santos," the colonel began, "I'd like you to meet General Harrison from Division Headquarters." General Harrison stepped forward and shook Maria's hand firmly. "Specialist, what you did yesterday was extraordinary. According to our intelligence analysis, that bomber was carrying enough explosives to destroy not just the ammunition depot, but potentially cause a chain reaction that would have leveled most of this outpost." Maria stood at attention, still feeling uncomfortable with all the attention. "Sir, I was just doing my job. I couldn't let him reach the depot." "Your job is to provide medical care," General Harrison replied with a slight smile. "What you did went far beyond that. You showed initiative, courage, and tactical awareness that prevented a major catastrophe." The debriefing that followed revealed the full scope of what Maria had prevented. The attack had been a coordinated effort designed to destroy the outpost and eliminate a key strategic position. Intelligence gathered from the captured bomber had already led to raids on enemy positions and the disruption of future planned attacks. 6 months later, Maria found herself in a ceremony at the Pentagon, receiving the Silver Star for gallantry in action. Her family sat in the front row, her mother crying with pride as the medal was pinned to Maria's dress uniform. The citation read, in part, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an armed enemy while serving as a combat medic." After the ceremony, a young reporter asked Maria how it felt to be called a hero. Maria thought for a moment before answering. "I don't think of myself as a hero," she said. "I think of myself as someone who was in the right place at the right time to help my fellow soldiers. That's what we do for each other." Maria completed 2 more deployments before leaving the Army, and using her GI Bill benefits to attend medical school. She became a trauma surgeon, drawn to emergency medicine where her ability to stay calm under pressure served her well. She never spoke much about that day in Afghanistan, even to her family. Today, Dr. Maria Santos works at a Level 1 trauma center in San Antonio, where her colleagues still call her Doc. She has saved hundreds of lives in operating rooms across Texas, approaching each emergency with the same calm determination she showed that morning in Afghanistan. The young bomber she captured that day was eventually released as part of a prisoner exchange. Maria learned this years later and found herself wondering what became of him, hoping that somehow he had found a different path. She had learned that being a hero wasn't about the moment of action. It was about choosing, again and again, to help others when they needed it most. In her office, alongside her medical diplomas and family photos, hangs a small framed picture of her old unit from Afghanistan. Sometimes, when facing a particularly difficult case in the trauma bay, Maria glances at that photo and remembers that being called Doc means being ready to act when others cannot. Whether the enemy is a suicide bomber or a failing heart on the operating table,